Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Angela Clement, and welcome to the Awaken Your Soul's Journey podcast. I am thrilled to have with me today Helen Gretchen Jones. And Helen is a compassionate death doula, an intuitive, and channeler who writes about shared death experiences and the essence of spiritual consciousness. And her writing focuses on fostering loving connections with oneself and others, and her work emphasizes trusting personal experiences and the teaching she channels from her team in spirit, known as the A Team. I like that. Helen holds a dual master's degree in art, history, and theology from St. Edward's University, and she's also a certified in sound bowl therapy, Reiki, hypnosis, and past life regressions. Beyond her role as a death doula, Helen serves as an intuitive guide, delivering messages from spirit. She co-teaches seminars with her community, ranging from grounding techniques to interpreting messages and signs from spirit, enriching the lives of diverse women across Central Texas. When she's not working with hospice patients, writing, or teaching, Helen can be found on the family ranch, hanging out with her husband, Tyler, their children, Ty and Ellie, and their menagerie of animals, including birds, cats, llamas, and goats. I love it. I love it. I was from a ranching background as well, so I totally relate to that.
What animals did you have?
Well, we had a cattle ranch, so it was the cow-calf production, actually.
Oh, nice. We've had a few cows on the property as well.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, I love that lifestyle. And it was a great place to raise kids. It really was.
It is.
Yeah.
I love it out there. I find it grounds me. It's centering, just being out in nature that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just the best. So I'm going to give you a chance to just talk a little bit about yourself and just kind of let people know who you are and what you do.
Well, the bio was a really good start to everything. That kind of sums it all up. But I work primarily as a death doula. So a death doula is someone who helps people to transition holistically, help them find peace and closure through the dying process. And oftentimes, death doulas are not just working with patients, they're working with the families as well, trying to sort of, I don't know, soften the edges around the grief. And because the journey through death, especially if it's a long-term illness, can be, well, it's an emotional roller coaster for a lot of people. There's the loss part where you don't want to lose that loved one, but also you perceive them to be suffering in many ways. And so a relief when death finally comes, and sometimes people feel guilty about that and working through those feelings. So it's really a multifaceted position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting. We didn't work with a death doula, Blaine and I. And I think primarily because we just didn't want to admit that he was going to die. So there was that. And almost refused the help because we thought perhaps we were losing hope through that process.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's right. We actually encounter that a lot. And that's one of the things I really hope to, by writing my book and getting the word out there, is to normalize talking about death and to recognize that talking about death and spirituality both is not giving up hope. It's actually something that everyone has to go through, young, old, it doesn't matter. It comes for the sick. It comes for the healthy. And if we can all put it out there, it doesn't have to be a taboo subject or, a feeling of, oh my goodness, if we talk about it, knock on wood, something might happen, none of that. And it is just as much a part of life as being alive is. And so I encourage everyone who is diagnosed with a terminal illness to consider a hospice situation, because hospice is not for like the last few days of your life. If you need it, it really can be a really helpful service that can be there for you for months and months and even years for some patients. Any kind of help and resources available during those difficult times is just, they're amazing. And I encourage everyone to seek that out.
Yeah. And I didn't know there was such thing as a death doula then either, and so I think that's the other thing, is that people don't know that these resources are available and they try to muddle through on their own. or they feel like, well, what can somebody say to help me? I know I had that attitude too. It was like, well, if he dies, he's going to die, and who can say something that's going to make it better, right? And so I found out through my own experience, and I'm excited to talk to you about it more, that we do need that support, and that it does help a great deal to have someone like you walking alongside. Yeah, so your book, Healing Whispers from Spirit Guides. So it covers a bunch of topics related to death and spirituality, just like what you were talking about, including shared death experiences encountered with deceased loved ones. So tell me, how did these experiences offer comfort and guidance to those who are grieving?
Well, okay, and in several ways. So when I'm working with a family, for example, I would first want to find out what their religious beliefs are or their cultural traditions. And I certainly don't want to step on anyone's toes or, make them feel uncomfortable. We want to work within their belief systems. That being said, I have had many patients of various religions that I've worked with that, in the end, still see deceased loved ones or beings of light right before they transition, within the week before they transition, typically, or sometimes longer. But and working within, what does that mean for their religion? How does that contradict it? And we would work through that. But my overall take is there's always someone there, a being of light, a deceased loved one, someone that's coming in and helping this person to transition to the other side. So I think when you start to allow yourself to be open, that we're not alone and that we're not alone in death, even if it feels like it, we can. I use the word meditation, but I understand after talking with a lot of people that a lot of people feel they can't meditate. So strike that word. It could be meditation if that works for you, but it could also be just sitting quietly. It could be turning inward. It could be self-reflection. It's whatever. You just take a moment and you just turn inside and wait and listen for that inner voice, that wisdom within you. And through that, we can actually allow ourselves to experience a shared death experience. And I think that is very comforting during the shared, to have a shared death experience. It jump starts us into the healing process of maneuvering through that grief. When you can witness your loved one being escorted by a being of light or by a deceased loved one, or being able to walk with them yourself part of the way into the spirit world, and the feelings that come with that, you feel huge, you feel expansive, you feel free, you feel this unconditional love for yourself and for every single being. So whenever that happens, you're like, wow, this is a transformative moment. And I haven't lost my loved one forever. This is a see you later, not a final goodbye. And that really helps kind of soften those edges and allows people to walk through their grief with a little bit more hope.
That's beautiful. I love everything that you just described there. So, in your book, um, and I think the way I understand it here, you kind of just woke up one morning and there was this voice telling you to write a book. Tell us how that all happened.
So I already have at that time also, because this was just a couple years ago, I also have a very strong connection with my team in spirit, who I call A team. And A team usually comes in with a voice inside my head. It could be male or female. It varies based on the personality that's emerging through the collective. But I woke up in the middle of June or the start of June, and it was a voice that was coming from outside my head. So they got my attention in a different way, and they told me I was going to be writing a book. And I did not feel qualified to write a book. I don't know if I don't know how many authors are out there that actually felt qualified, or if it was just a calling. But for me, it was a calling. My team in spirit insisted, actually, and I don't know. I thought surely there's more people qualified than me. I've never had an interest in writing a book. Where would I even begin? What would I even write about? It seemed a little overwhelming, a lot overwhelming. um, and they told me, and I kind of argued back, and they said, just write what you know. Well, I know a little about a lot of different things, but I'm in no way an expert is how I thought in my head. But I was having some really beautiful transformative bedside experiences with my patients that I'd been journaling for years already. And so I thought, well, maybe I've learned something from these experiences. And so the book talks about something I've learned and then a supporting bedside death story, a beautiful story of one of my patients or clients or even a family member. But it was first I start a chapter with a teaching that I've learned from this process and then a supporting bedside story and then another teaching and a supporting bedside story. So that's how that unraveled. But I don't know. I'm excited that I actually was able to, with the help of A Team, write the book because it really did. I end each chapter with one of their channeled messages because I find what they have to say so much more meaningful. Their perspective is one of everything's okay always. Shift perspectives. Stop being in your like little tiny bubble. So I find it to be a helpful book at this time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned compassion in your work as a death doula. And I love the word compassion. And I've been actually exploring that word more and more, the difference between compassion and, worrying about somebody or, there's a whole gamut of definition that kind of goes with that. But how does compassion play a role in supporting individuals through the process of dying and grieving?
Okay, so when I first started working with my team in spirit, they've been working with me for on compassion for about 20 years. This has been, I know, maybe I have a thick skull, but they're like, wow, we're going to drill this into her. So the compassion has been, I guess, an overarching theme for them that they felt it was really important for me to understand. So they had me, they frequently actually, if I see something happening, and maybe I'm not even fully aware of my thoughts at the time. I am just silently having my own judgmental awareness about whatever situation I'm in. And I'm not spewing the words everywhere, but I guess it's in my head. And all of a sudden, I'll hear A Team step in and say, now put yourself in their shoes. Not what you would do different, not what you would say, not what you would change or try to do anything other than what they're doing. Just put yourself in their shoes and just feel what they're feeling. Do what they're doing. Be them without trying to change it. Because oftentimes, we put ourselves in someone else's shoes, but then we take it a step further and say, you know what I would do differently? This is how I can fix the situation. And there's no fixing. There's no trying to change it. That's what A Team always says. Just be in their shoes and experience that moment. And that's how you can find a quick way of finding compassion for someone else. And there's no need to change anyone. And why would you want to? That's what they tell me all the time. So I have, for example, addiction runs in my family. And it has even led to homelessness to some of my family through addiction. And so most people, they come across that and they're just like, how can I fix them? Let's get them into rehab. What can we change? What can we do? This is no quality of life. And that is how we all feel when we think of someone struggling through that sort of situation. And then my team in spirit, A Team, comes in and says, who are you to say that they need to change? Who are you to say that their quality of life is not important to them on a soul level? Who are you to say that they are not worthy of experiencing this, their choices that they've made? Are they asking for help? No. Then it's not your place. Are they asking for help? Yes. Then do what you can. But it isn't for me. I immediately want to change that. And they're just like, no, no, no. Now you're dismissing the value of that lesson for them. And now, unless they're asking for help, that's different. But if they're not, you can gently work with them and say, hey, there's another way, but your way is not the better way. You can let them know another way exists. And if they ever need help, they can come to you. But don't try to force that on anybody, even if it's clear to you, like addiction or homelessness or something like that. So that is how my team has been working, all sorts of situations. So when I'm now sitting with people at bedside and I'm recognizing this is one of the deepest losses that they're ever going to have, the loss of a loved one, and even the loss of their own life whenever they're feeling it's hard to leave our physical lives behind sometimes. Um, there isn't anything to fix it. And I think all these years of compassion of not trying to fix something that's been drilled into me is helpful now at the bedside because there isn't anything to fix. Now it's about being present and understanding what they're going through and finding ways to help them find peace in the process, but not fix anything. So I think that's where the compassion for my patients has started with A-Team years ago, helping me understand there's nothing to fix.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. That's wonderful.
I kind of went up on a tangent, but
Well,
that's
but and like I say, I have this real curiosity about the real true meaning of compassion, because I know that, there's empathy, there's sympathy, and so compassion is different to me. And so the way that you describe that, I love it. I absolutely love it. So you also have a concept in your book called Science Club. So, how does that relate to the exploration of spirituality and the afterlife?
okay. I was sitting in my closet trying to, hoping to connect to A-Team years ago now. And I wanted to understand the concept of time a little bit better, that time is not linear and, future lives and past lives are all happening at the same time. I had all this information that I wanted answers on. And at that time, a gentleman appeared in my closet. Closet was where I was meditating because it's the quietest room in the house. Just close the door, no one bothers me. So I was in a closet. Um, and I was hoping to get information on time, and someone who was not on A-Team, or what I perceived to be A-Team, came from a different space when they came in, a deceased person, and he was a physicist. And he was a deceased physicist and he was British, and I was speaking with him and we were having a full conversation. And then other physicists joined in and other scientists over several months and years, actually. And I just kind of collectively called them Science Club because I was an art history and theology major. I have no basis in physics. I can't, like, even the stuff that they tell me, I write down, but I'm like, I have no idea what this means. And even though I go research it, I go Google it, but I'm like, I feel lost reading the Google explanation or the Wikipedia explanation. Like, it's so far over my head. But the gentleman in my closet was named Paul Dirac, and I had never heard of him. But it turned out he's like won a Nobel Prize, so he's kind of a big deal in his part of the world. He was like a thing. So, so Science Club comes in, and they try to teach lessons around physics and how it connects to spirituality. So I take notes. They dictate stuff, and I write it down. But I am so at a loss sometimes at what I'm reading, but I included it in the book because my husband, who's not very spiritual, really likes the Science Club aspect. And I was like, oh, this is a part that is so hard to follow, but I'll include it. And then since then, I've had several people reach out to me and say their favorite part was Science Club because they're trying to rationalize and make logical sense of spiritual happenings. And that's where Science Club does come in. So, and just to show how ridiculous I am with physicists, I saw a woman physicist come through. She said her name was Marie, and I swear to you, I thought she was like a writer like Jane Austen. I did not know Marie Curie. I mean, that she's like a big deal too. Okay, so this is how far outside my realm. Now I know lots of people know who she is, and this is like, it's like common knowledge for a lot of people. But I just want you to know, Science Club is so far out of the realm of comfort for me. But they're included in there, and they are trying to continuously teach me how physics relates to spirituality. So that's Science Club.
I love it. I love it. And I would be the same. There's no way I would. Physics. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
But I can see if you had that logical science mind and you were, searching in the area of spirituality and you wanted some concrete something to base your beliefs on, well, there you go.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't actually need that. I've already had a connection to my spirit. I'm very spiritual in that way. But I did ask him, why are you guys coming to me? And it turns out they come to a lot of people, not just me. But they said, because you asked us to. And I don't remember doing that consciously, but I suppose had Michelangelo or Van Gogh come to me, I would be like, did I already learn this in college and I forgot about it? It's in my subconscious mind because I studied art and art history. So I guess having people come through that I know nothing about was very validating for me. Then I could look it up and validate the information coming through and be like, wow, there's no way I could have known that. I mean, there's other people who could have known it who maybe studied physics. I don't think I've delivered anything new to the physics community per se,
Mhm.
but it's about validating it for me, helping me trust spirit. And also, there's a few things in there that don't exist, but maybe they will one day. I kept them in just for keeping it all authentic, but
Yeah.
there was nothing to Google on it because they don't exist. But
Great. Well, that's awesome. I love that. And I love that you got that validation. I think that's
yes,
amazing, right? Because we need that. Our
yes,
minds are constantly questioning whether these messages that we're getting are real, true. So that's so
I
cool.
do that even now. I've been doing this for years, and I'm like, oh my gosh, did that just really happen? And I write it down and journal it, and I just have to remind myself that yes, be open to all experiences.
Hmm. Yeah. Your experiences with spirit, including encounters with beings of light. This is a central theme in your book. So, these encounters, how have they shaped your understanding of spirituality and the nature of existence?
Um, okay, so sitting bedside of patients and having and witnessing beings of light or having them see beings of light has completely changed, or I should say, solidified my belief that we are not alone and that there is something more to our lives than just this physical existence that our physical rods and cones of our eyes pick up, and that when you allow yourself to accept that there's something more and you start to use small signs, which are not like a giant purple monkey playing piano in your closet, they're going to be small, gentle signs that fall within the flow of nature. When you allow those things to kind of come in and you recognize them as something more, then it opens the floodgates for spirit to connect to you. And that's not a scary thing. This is not like ghosts or anything like that. It's a connection and it's a heart connection. They're not going to pop out and startle you while you're washing dishes. It isn't like that. It's about having this deep inner knowing and feeling that you are loved and connected to something more than just yourself, something greater. That's what opens up. And when that opens up, you start to realize there's so much more around us. And as we start to transition, we become aware of those beings because, first of all, our loved one who's dying is in two different worlds at once. They're in the physical world and they're having experiences while they're sleeping or appearing to be sleeping. They're actually very, very active. Um, and actually, you mentioned you had a Blaine, was it?
Yes. Hmm.
You had Blaine that transitioned.
Yes.
I don't know that story, but I would like to share that it has been my experience so far when I'm sitting bedside with these patients that they step out of their bodies before the final breath. And the body is like a vehicle. We jump into it. We create it. First of all, we help co-create it, but we jump into it. We some take it slow, some take it fast, some drive it into the ground, some take it in for regular maintenance. But when it starts to putter out and it no longer serves us in the way that we need to, we don't have to stay in it till the very end. We can pop out and watch it coast to a stop. And that is really what I am seeing at almost every single one of my patients' deaths is that they're actually observing the body is shutting down. It's taking the final breath. It could appear to us observers that it's suffering, the people who are witnessing it, and it can feel maybe even a little bit scary, but the person has already stepped out and is witnessing this and feeling the love of the family around them. And whenever you have the gift of being able to see your loved one, or at the very least feel their love because you've allowed yourself to be open to such experiences, it really makes it, I don't want to say easier. The grief is still going to be there, but it does fill you with a sense of hope that there's more and that you will see your loved one again.
Mm, beautiful. Yes. And I have heard that before. And I actually truly believe that the spirit does step out. And I think that gives a lot of comfort to people, especially when you like you say, you've seen what you think is suffering happening. That's hard to watch. So,
It is.
mhm.
And there are also people who have had near death experiences. I'm not one, but who have, watched the CPR and all the hard stuff that's being done to the body, and they're watching it from the top of the hospital ceiling, or people who, you know, they say, oh, I just popped out of my body and right before the truck impacted the car. And then I had this near death experience. And then I came back after the truck had impacted the car. It
Mhm.
was sort of like that is all very supporting. And the same thing whenever you're taking that final breath, if you have a terminal illness, the person is already standing outside their body. So I think that, because so many people fear that last breath. Whenever I'm sitting with patients, they fear watching their loved one take that breath, or they fear missing it. I don't want to, I'm so afraid I'm going to not be there when they take that last breath. And the last breath is just really not as important as everybody makes it out to be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, in your childhood, you had experiences with spirit that were not always understood or accepted by others. And I think a lot of people have had that, experience because it wasn't, and it still isn't, but it really wasn't very well accepted. I know when I was a kid. Um, so, how do these experiences influence your journey and your work now as a death doula?
So when I was about 12 or 13, I think I put in the book I was 12, but I really can't quite remember the exact year. But when I was 12 or 13, I had a spirit appear above my bed, a man, and he made me feel it was in the middle of the night. My whole room was dark, but he somehow was emanating light and it kind of lit up my room. And I remember not being afraid. I remember he made me feel so safe and so loved, and I was protected. And I just was so happy he was there. I felt like I knew him, even though I didn't physically recognize him. He was bald. I remember that. Um, and he was all bluish white light. And he told me everything's going to be okay. Well, shortly after that, my parents started the divorce process and they moved away and my sister and I went to go live with my grandparents. But when I woke up that morning and I told my parents, um, there was a man in my room. They panicked thinking someone came in my window initially. And when I started explaining the being of light, my dad said, I believe you believe that's what you saw. And it made me feel, even at that young age, that they didn't quite know what they were talking about, like that it wasn't real. Maybe it was a dream they were saying. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. This was such a transformative experience for me. And my parents were not religious or spiritual in any way. And so it would have been hard for them. I understand that now, hard for them to process that kind of information. But it did not make me question my experience, the validity of that experience, but it did make me question their teachings, their wisdom, if they really did know everything like kids think their parents do. So from that point on, it shifted that all I can trust are my own experiences. And if that's the case, can I really trust myself fully enough to trust my experiences? So I became my own biggest skeptic and self-doubter, and I need a lot of validation, that sort of thing. But it's been quite the journey. So yes, my childhood experience of having my stuff not be accepted only strengthened my ability in myself to trust spirit over the teachings of my family, for example. But it doesn't always happen that way. A lot of kids shut down and say, oh, I guess that was my imagination. And I think that they rediscover it. That doesn't ever go away forever. They rediscover it later. And I think that's what happens after age 30. People come into their own. They feel like they reach a point for some reason. It happens in their 30s and 40s. And then there's like this big beacon in their 50s, it seems. As I journaled this stuff. So it hasn't been my experience personally yet, but I write down other people's experiences just to see if I can see a pattern. But there seems to be this big awakening moment for people between their 30s and 50s. And that's when they evaluate their choices, their beliefs, and they start to realize they've had a connection since childhood that they kind of swept under the rug so that they can continue to fit in. So,
Wow. Yeah. I think it's valuable for people to hear that experience. So, the last thing I really want to ask you is about forgiveness, because I think this is huge. And I don't think we, as a society, really understand. Maybe just we're starting to begin to understand how forgiveness is a part of this whole grieving process. And can you talk about the emotions and how that forgiveness can help us find peace in the face of death?
Absolutely. So, this is a big question, and forgiveness takes many forms, really. It has been my experience so far that people who offer forgiveness at the bedside of their dying family or loved ones, both as the family or as the dying patient, seem to find peace through the final moments and moving forward if you're the family. And those who don't seem to have a longer, maybe more uphill battle or struggle with grief. Forgiveness is a loaded word for a lot of people. I'm also learning because people who have been maybe very victimized by someone else have a hard time offering forgiveness through those situations. And we can change the word from forgiveness to, unburdening or releasing or letting go. It's really the process of saying, okay, this has happened. And it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for that person taking part in it with me. But I'm going to let it go for my own peace. And I'm going to now offer forgiveness to that person. I'm not removing the fact that it has happened. I'm not telling him in any way that it's okay. But I'm validating my experience that it happened and that I no longer want this pain carrying around with me. So when people have something that they feel they need to get off their chest before they die, and they're given that opportunity, over and over, these people have a less agitated transition. They seem to more smoothly go in like everything's okay, no matter what. I've left everything here okay. I don't know what is coming for me next, but at least right here, right now, I'm at peace with everything that I have said and that I've done. And do I have regrets? Yes. But have I told people that I maybe should have made a different decision or something like that? That releases the family from feeling victimized by the person who's dying. In addition to that, the people who are the loved ones who want to offer forgiveness for their what they feel are their own trespasses, they seem to move through the grieving process with so much more ease. It doesn't weigh them down like it used to. I still encounter families who just wouldn't allow themselves to be vulnerable in the moment, and I'll check in with them even now, and they are really struggling. And so now we're taking steps to find ways of forgiving or letting go of what they feel wasn't taken care of before that person died and allowing them to do it while the person's already passed. But that is so much harder because you're not getting that immediate validation from that person.
Right.
So forgiveness is about closure. It's about releasing yourself from whatever has weighed you down your entire life so far. And so sitting with that person and allowing yourself to be vulnerable and asking for forgiveness or letting them know you forgive them is one of the hardest things that a person can do. And I remember meeting with a patient and she was trying to forgive her mother. She was going to be dying before her mother. And she wanted to forgive her mother, but she was so afraid to be vulnerable because it didn't feel safe to her to do that. But I said, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're already dying. You got to get it out now. You've got to clear it up. And she did. She was vulnerable. She said it. And the mom didn't receive it well initially, but she came back a few hours later and opened up herself. It's like she needed time to process this. Even the hardest people will soften a little bit when they know that there's no time left. So it is so important that if you have lived a life where there are regrets and that you require forgiveness for more peace, to offer that for yourself and for others. And it really is a gift.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Really appreciate it. So, tell us how people can get a hold of you, how they can work with you, where they can find your book, all of that.
The book is on Amazon. I have it on Kindle and on audiobook and paperback and Healing Whispers from Spirit Guides. And then my website is www.helengretchenjones.com.
Okay, perfect. And do you have any final words or wisdom to share with anyone before we go?
I suppose that I'll reiterate what I started in the very beginning, and that is it is so important to recognize that death comes for everybody and that there are so many resources available to both the patient and to the family. And it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to reach out for those resources, because it isn't about giving up hope, which is what it can feel like sometimes. And you're not jinxing anything by reaching out. I'm actually going to share something else really quick. So, when I started working with the dying community, it was after my dad died in 2015. And I had A team had allowed me to see his death in advance 5 months before he died. And when I first received that, I thought, oh my gosh, am I supposed to change this? Am I supposed to intervene? What is this? And so after that, I started getting hits on people pretty often, actually, of when their ballpark of when they were going to transition is. It's a ballpark. They don't give me the date and time, you know. But it's my initial response was, am I supposed to change this? Why are you giving me this information? I now have come to recognize that working with the dying community, that information is like in waves all around us, because the soul on a soul level has already made the choice to die. And once that choice has been made on a soul level, that wave of information is already out there. So tuning into it, it's just being made available. And it's being made available so that the people who are still here and the people who are going to be transitioning can find peace. They're like, hey, the information's out there. We know it's going to be happening. So in no way does reaching out for additional assistance change that wave. That wave is out there because on a soul level, that person has already decided. Now, what do you want to do about it? It's happening. Do you want to have as many available resources, tools, nurses, doctors, ideas, whatever, everything come up so that person can have the most beautiful death possible? Or do you want to hold on and cling to the hope that maybe this isn't it and just ignore all of those possibilities? And it just adds so much resistance. So I guess that's the final thought. The final thought is reach out, talk to someone, gather as many tools and resources, and make this transition one of the most beautiful transitions you can offer a loved one or yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I think that is a huge message. Um, and so I want to thank you again for taking the time to talk with us today and to share all of this. And I encourage people to check out the book. And I want to thank everyone for watching, and bye for now.
Thank you, Angela.